This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, and faith-focused feature stories with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good Friday afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. If you like it hot, you'll love what we've got. A warming trend starts this weekend. By early next week, some of us will be nudging 90 degrees. Kev's got that toasty summer-like forecast on the way. But first at noon, President Trump is on the way home after wrapping up a 2-day state visit to China. The communist country's offered to help us with the war in Iran and buy more American goods, including soybeans, beef, oil, and energy. China's also signed on to purchasing 200 American-made Boeing jets, and that pleases Congressman John James.
These are the fruits of peace through strength. The world, especially China, is taking America seriously, taking America at its word. That makes America more safe, and that makes America's economy strong.
The biggest bone of contention between the U.S. and China continues to be Taiwanese independence. Beijing has not ruled out a military takeover of the island. The U.S. has sold billions of dollars worth of arms to Taiwan. Asian affairs expert Gordon Chang.
The people in Taiwan, they want good relations with Beijing, but they don't self-identify as Chinese. They see themselves as Taiwanese. I think the status quo will continue. And the status quo is great for the United States, it's great for Taiwan, and it's great for the free world.
President Trump has invited China's ruler Xi Jinping to the White House in September. Now to the war in Ukraine. Yeah, that is still going on. The death toll from yesterday's Russian missile strike on the Ukrainian capital has jumped to 24. 3 children are among those killed in that military operation. CBS's Aiden Stretch has the latest from Kyiv.
I'm at the site of a 9-story apartment block that was completely destroyed in the attacks. We've seen the dead carried away in body bags. Dozens of residents have been rescued, many badly injured, while the search continues for those still missing in this scene of utter devastation.
20 locations were attacked in the capital city, including a school and a veterinary clinic. The Trump administration wants to indict former Cuban strongman Raul Castro. The White House accuses the communist leader of ordering attacks on U.S. airplanes flying humanitarian missions in the mid-1990s. Reporter Nicole Killian.
The planes were struck down by Cuban fighter jets over international waters back in 1996. 3 Americans and a U.S. resident were killed. Cuban officials have argued the shoot-down was legitimate, claiming the planes violated its airspace.
Raul Castro still considered one of the most powerful political figures in Cuba, even though he stepped down as the leader of the Communist Party in 2021. Our coverage continues with correspondent Sarah Lynch.
There's no extradition with Cuba. They're not going to send their 94-year-old former president, who still has a lot of political power and connection, to the United States to face charges if this were to happen.
Yesterday, CIA Director John Ratcliffe went to Cuba to meet with Castro's grandson in Havana. The FBI director is in more hot water for getting into the water at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Kash Patel went on a VIP snorkeling session last summer at the site of the USS Arizona. That sunken ship is a military cemetery and is off limits to snorkeling and diving with rare exceptions. More than 1,000 sailors and Marines died aboard the Arizona during the surprise attack by Japan during World War II. Now to Ohio, where 2 people died Thursday afternoon when a small plane crashed into a home. It happened in Akron. Correspondent Meg Oliver.
Callers are saying this is a possible plane accident.
Officials say 2 people on board the aircraft were killed. A family of 4 was inside the home at the time, but able to escape escape the devastating fire. Neighbors told local media the father was able to wake up his 2 napping children and get everyone out of the house.
It's crazy. I'm so glad that where it hit, it didn't hit where there were people sleeping.
Neighbors say it landed in front of the home before crashing into the garage. That's when the fire erupted.
The FAA and NTSB both on the scene investigating the cause of that plane crash. In a 7-2 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has given the green light for the continued sale of the abortion pill mifepristone through the mail. Chelsea Yeoman with Alliance Defending Freedom says the drug's not safe for many reasons.
Any drug that results in the death of a human being is not safe and effective, and therefore probably should never have been approved in the first place. And that's what we hold. We hold that abortion drugs are never necessary. Abortion drugs end the lives of human beings and endanger their mothers. There's no place for them in medicine.
Only Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito ruled against continuing mail-order delivery of mifepristone. Studies have shown 1 in 10 women who take the drug wind up in the hospital with serious side effects. Cancer centers across America are scrambling to procure an experimental drug being hailed as a breakthrough for pancreatic cancer. It's called daraxonrasib, and the FDA approved its use 2 weeks ago. Just 3% of pancreatic cancer patients survive more than 5 years after their initial diagnosis. This drug has been shown to double life expectancy in some cases. This Sunday, the White House will host a day-long prayer festival to promote America's Christian origins. Leaders of church and state will come together to rededicate the country as one nation under God. The event will happen on the National Mall, and it's all part of America 250 celebrations.
Remember what made America great? Alexis de Tocqueville, the French journalist who appeared in America in the early 1800s trying to study the secret to our success as a nation, wrote that it was only when he realized the righteousness that was aflame from the pulpits in churches across America did he realize what made America great. And it was that America was good.
That's Grant May. He's the communications director for the group Standing for Freedom.
Religion and God is something that has long left the main square of public discourse. But at the end of the day, you're seeing the results of it. You see why young people are more empty, more broken, more depressed, more anxious than ever before. So that's why you're starting to see this revival. People are asking, there must be more than this. I'm not an accident, and they're looking for a creator.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and War Secretary Pete Hegseth will all speak at the prayer rally. President Trump will record a video message. The Reverend Franklin Graham, Liberty University Chancellor Jonathan Falwell, and Pastor Paula White, the faith advisor to the president, will headline that day-long prayer rally on the National Mall this coming Sunday. The Library of Congress is inducting 25 new songs this year to the National Recording Registry for preservation purposes. Included on the list this year is this 1965 classic from the Byrds.
To everything.
Also new to the registry this year are songs by Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Reba McEntire, and Ray Charles. The Library of Congress chooses recordings that are culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. 700 recordings have been preserved for posterity since 1944. Still to come on the Noon Report for a Friday. Hantavirus in upstate New York, government dysfunction in Albany, and Penn State votes to unionize.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. The weekend is upon us, and a warming trend is ahead. Forecast details are up in 10.
All right, Kevin, we'll see you then. Thank you. Let's check the stories making news where you live. All across New York and Pennsylvania, the Buffalo Sabres, sad to say, just a loss away now from being eliminated from the NHL playoffs. Family Life's Dee Haley was at last night's game and files this report.
A strong first period vanished as the Sabres lost 6-3 to the Montreal Canadiens last night at the KeyBank Center. The Canadiens scored the last 4 goals of the game and now lead the best-of-7 series 3-2. Game 6 is scheduled to start at 8 p.m. tomorrow at Bell Center in Montreal. There will be a watch party at KeyBank Center, so fans can watch the game together on the video board. Tickets will cost $5. All proceeds benefit the Buffalo Sabres Foundation. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
All right, thank you, Dee. Well, more on last night's game with Randy coming up in sports. The New York State budget is more than 6 weeks late, and the state legislatures had to pass another extender, the 12th so far this year. This will help fund payrolls through the weekend. Republican State Senator Stephen Rhodes says government dysfunction is alive and well in Albany.
The governor came out last week, not only announced the fact that we had a budget deal, but had an entire PowerPoint presentation with details about the budget bill. Apart from the fact that we don't know whether people are lying, don't know what's happening, we can't get any information, there's no transparency. This budget process has been turned into an abomination.
This year's spending package is the tardiest in 16 years in New York, and it's the 5th straight late state budget under Governor Hochul's watch. She's drawn the ire of many in her own party for attaching policy issues to fiscal items in the budget adoption process. Penn State faculty have voted to unionize. Over 2,000 teachers will join the Service Employees International Union. The faculty believe joining a union creates the best learning environment for students. The Pennsylvania Labor Relations Board still has to approve it. A suspected case of hantavirus has showed up in Ontario County, New York.
It is not related to the cruise ship outbreak that is currently in the national news.
That's Health Director Kate Ott. She says there's no danger to the public.
I can tell you that it's mild. The case is mild, and hantavirus is not always mild. It can be really severe. So we're really grateful for that.
The local case is not transmitted human to human, and the infected person does not have to isolate.
The hantavirus that occurs in the U.S. is not spread person to person. So it is spread between mice and humans. So if I have it and I sneeze on you, you're not going to get it.
Her advice for the months ahead?
Really important for this spring and summer to use some protection if you're out there cleaning your shed or your garage, your attic. If there's a chance that there are droppings there, whether it's from mice or bats or birds, because all three can transmit disease, wear a mask.
That sound courtesy of 13 Wham in Rochester. This is the first suspected case of hantavirus in Ontario County in over 20 years. A proposal in western Pennsylvania could make one county there one of the first in the country to require paid parental leave for workers. Family Life's Brian Query explains.
The Allegheny County Health Department is considering a measure that would require employers to provide up to 18 weeks of paid parental leave, along with expanded paid sick time. Officials say the proposal is aimed at improving public health outcomes for parents and newborns, noting many families currently return to work too soon because of financial pressure. If approved, the policy would apply to businesses of all sizes across Allegheny County. The proposal now heads to a 30-day public comment period. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Thank you, Brian. In Syracuse, New York, there's a healthy debate over whether to ban businesses from collecting biometric data on customers. This data includes the shape of your face, the color of your eyes, and even how you walk. City Council member Corey Williams is concerned how this data would be used and whether it's even accurate.
We talk about, embarrassment. We talk about increased interaction with law enforcement. There's a whole lot of negative consequences to being misidentified.
Recently, Onondaga County passed a law requiring businesses notify customers whenever their biometric data is collected. Syracuse Common Council will vote on Monday on a biometric data collection ban. We've got sports next. It's the 2-minute drill right here on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, not a good night for Buffalo's goalies, and their defense was rather porous as well. Buffalo's offense scored 3 goals on the first 4 shots, but then they disappeared. The Canadiens down 3-2 after one scored 3 times in the second, once in the third, and they knocked off the Sabres 6-3. Montreal now up 3-2, and they are heading home for Game 6 on Saturday. The good news for Buffalo, they are 4-1 on the road in these playoffs. Out in California, the Golden Knights punched their ticket into the Western Conference Finals with a dominating 5-1 victory over Anaheim. They will face the Colorado Avalanche beginning on Wednesday. To baseball, the Mets spotted Detroit 3 runs in the first inning, but then the Amazons kicked it into gear. They roared back to sweep the Tigers with a 9-4 thumping. Rookie A.J. Ewing hit his first big league home run to spark the comeback. Brett Beatty, Juan Soto, and Marcus Semien also went deep for New York. The Phillies won the rubber game of their series with Boston, picking up a 3-1 victory. Once again, Kyle Schwarber doing the damage. He hit a 2-run shot in the 8th inning that broke up a scoreless tie. Philadelphia has won 4 of 5. The Pirates breezed past the Rockies 7-2. Ryan O'Hearn hit a 2-run shot in the first, and the Buccos were off and running. Other winners in the Bigs: Seattle, the White Sox, Reds, Cincinnati clobbered Washington 15-1. The Brewers, Cubs, Dodgers, Twins, and Cardinals. That is a look at sports.
All right, thank you very much, Randy. And still to come on this Friday edition of the Noon Report, summer-like warmth on the way. The Capital Connection crew is coming up too. And at the end of the broadcast, we celebrate the simplicity that is the chocolate chip.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. In March, with an 8-1 majority vote, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that, quote, counseling conversations are speech, and that states cannot silence viewpoints in the counseling room. The majority included all the justices but Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who claimed in her dissent that states should be able to use, and I quote here, police powers to establish and enforce the standards of care that bind medical professionals, including what she called professional medical speech. And apparently, for Justice Jackson, that power should also include the ability to determine what should count as scientific consensus, given the collapse of consensus on this issue of so-called gender-affirming care. However, in a concurring opinion to the majority decision, liberal justices Kagan and Sotomayor noted that the Colorado law was not viewpoint neutral. Had it been, they said, it would have raised a different and more difficult question. In another instance last summer, Justice Sotomayor did not agree with a Trump administration policy, but she also believed it was not the place of the court to decide. Justice Jackson, on the other hand, described her appointment to the Supreme Court as her opportunity to, and I quote, tell people in my opinions how I feel about the issues, end quote. What's happening on the court is an example of an ongoing fissure between liberals and progressives on both the political and ideological left in America. As Colson Center Senior Fellow Dr. Glenn Sunshine previously described, part of this difference is that standpoint epistemology, the liberal idea that each has our own truth from our own perspective, has now devolved into expressive individualism, the idea that our truth should be imposed on everyone else as a matter of our own human dignity. The implications of this shift from liberalism to progressivism are quite significant, especially when it comes to the rights of speech and conscience. Back on April 22nd, Lois McClatchy Miller posted a clip of a British police officer informing a street preacher he could not share the gospel in places or ways that might cause offense or dissuade people from seeking abortions. And back in March, Päivi Räsänen, a lawmaker in Finland, was found guilty of, quote, inciting hatred for calling homosexuality a disorder back in 2004. Now, no riots and no hatred were actually ever incited in the over 20 years since, but she was guilty of believing and expressing wrong things. You might remember when many progressives left Twitter when it was purchased by Elon Musk, but that was not because they feared that their ideas would be suppressed, only because they feared that contrary ideas would not be suppressed. And so they moved to the alternative social media platform Blue Sky, which has turned out to be quite a mess. The progressive drive for ideological purity has stunted any real conversation there. But that kind of intolerance is, of course, a feature of progressivism, not a bug. Though people will often use liberal and progressive as interchangeable terms, they're not the same thing. Like the new dissident right, which devolved out of classic conservatism and rejected core tenets of it, progressivism and liberalism are certainly not the same either. Liberalism called for tolerance. Progressivism silences dissent and then calls it tolerance. Progressivism claims to be about moving forward, but forward is really just a rejection of everything old, traditional, and settled. In fact, to modern progressives, progress is transgression. They sense the world is not as it should be, but then they're threatened by the idea that there is a way it should be. Divorced from reality and reason, compliance with this vision cannot be argued. Rather, it has to be enforced. And thus, we've had this shift from encouraging all viewpoints to punishing all dissent. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
Thanks, John. Outside we go next. It's Weather Where You Live with meteorologist Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life forecast for this afternoon, much milder than it was yesterday. We'll have sunshine, still some patchy clouds, especially across central New York and northeast Pennsylvania. High temps into the 60s. Then tonight turning out mainly clear, low temps 40s. Tomorrow, some sunshine and warm, highs in the 70s. Some showers arrive, though, later in the afternoon across areas close to Lake Erie, spreading east at night with a rumble of thunder. Sunday, morning clouds and a shower, followed by some sunshine and warm. High temperatures Sunday, 70s and lower 80s.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Cranking up the AC this weekend for sure. It is Friday, folks. Congratulations, you've made it. And this is the Noon Report on Family Life. This is Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you direct connection to all that's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues at the state capitals. This week they are Jason McGuire with New York Families and Dan Barkowiak at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. Well, hey, Tuesday's a big day in both New York and PA. It's primary day in Pennsylvania and school budget day in New York. Dan, I want to begin with you. Why do Christians especially need to make a point to show up at the polls and vote on Tuesday, even in a primary election?
Yeah, that's the great question. And Christians always need to be engaged in the process. And you can certainly be an informed voter with our online voter guide at pafamilyvoter.org. Elections have consequences. I'm glad that Christians care about issues like protecting babies in the womb. And we just had a court case here in Pennsylvania, one vote margin, where it was forcing taxpayer funding of abortion and jeopardizing really the pro-life limits in our state. So I think it's a reminder, in Pennsylvania, we elect judges, we elect state lawmakers. So those decisions at the ballot will affect various policies that impact our communities, our churches, our religious freedoms. So absolutely need to vote in this primary election, May 19th.
Jason, May 19th is also, as we mentioned, school budget day in New York. It's sad to say that probably less than 10% of eligible voters will take the time to cast a vote in their local school budget election. But this is a big deal for people of faith, too. Why do we need to be taking part in school budget day?
Yeah, first for New York, remember this deals with not the big 5 districts. They vote in November, but many of the other rural districts and suburban districts across the state of New York will be this May 19th. And again, we're not voting for just the dollars, as important as that is to New York families, but we really are voting for board members, and they choose the superintendents, they set the policies, they set the tones that will impact so many students, millions of students across the state of New York. And Christians want to have a part of what's happening in the public schools, even if their children aren't attending those schools, because it is for the good of all those kids.
Yeah. Dan, back to Harrisburg. We talked last week about Senate Bill 1321. I know PA Family Institute is getting behind this effort for sure, blocking taxpayer-funded sex-rejecting interventions on minors, still happening in Pennsylvania despite federal ban. Is there any appetite in Harrisburg for the full Senate to tackle this topic in an election year?
Well, I think there certainly is, and really it shouldn't be a political issue, but there has been a divide, a partisan divide in Harrisburg on the issue. It's similar to the Save Women's Sports legislation. That passed the Republican-controlled state Senate. It stalled in the Democrat-controlled state House. So certainly I think Senate Bill 1321 is going to face a similar challenge. I think most taxpayers would agree we shouldn't be funding sex-rejecting interventions on minors. It's happened to thousands of kids over the past decade. The legislature is not back in session until after the primary, but certainly I see there's support in the state Senate, and it's why people, especially engaging your state senator on Senate Bill 1321.
Jason, I know you were happy to see Governor Hochul decide to opt New York into this federal tax credit scholarship program. If you would explain how this works and why is this a big win for school choice in New York?
Well, Bob, I got to tell you, there's a tremendous benefit coming from this program. This would allow people to opt into this tax credit, giving $1,700 to private school students and hopefully homeschool students that will help school choice across the Empire State and America. The governor, in a meeting with some Jewish individuals, indicated that she would be willing to sign this into law, and her signature is needed. However, there were some later comments that came from her administration that there may be some reticence still. So we are encouraging people to visit our Action Center and to go ahead and take action on this issue to encourage the governor to opt New York into the federal tax credit scholarship program.
Dan, big news at the state Supreme Court. David Weck, the former Democrat, has left the party. He accuses Democrats of coddling too much to Jew hatred and other forms of anti-Semitism. I want to get your thoughts on what this means for the Commonwealth and how his leaving the Democratic Party shakes up the balance of power on the Commonwealth's highest court.
Yeah, well, certainly, Justice Weck, it was interesting timing, leaving. It doesn't change the makeup of the Supreme Court that we have in our state. He was just elected last year to a 10-year term. He's going to be serving into his 70s. So to some degree, it's more politically symbolic. But I think it does reflect a broader trend in Pennsylvania politics. So he switched to be an independent, and we are seeing a growth in independent third-party voters. It's up to 16% of registered voters statewide. And so when it comes to Democrats, they used to have, it was about half of all voters in the state, and now it's down to about 43%. So certainly the narrow margins between Republicans and Democrats is starting to get smaller, and that impacts our primary election. We have where it's just the party that you're registered that you can vote. So we'll have to see that impact as it goes to the primary election on May 19th.
Jason, Senate Majority Leader Andrew Stewart-Cousins seems to on a daily basis say we're getting close when it comes to finalizing the $268 billion state budget. Of course, we had the big controversy last week with Governor Hochul announcing an agreement and then Carl Heastie saying, hold on a minute, there is no agreement. Are you expecting they will make that June 4th get out of Dodge deadline, or could this go later into the month of June, perhaps?
Yeah, I see no scenario where they actually get out by their self-imposed deadline of June 4th, the end of the regular legislative session. I do think they'll go beyond that to, and they normally do, a few days anyways, but there are primaries in June as well, and so many members will want to get out of there. So I think we'll probably go into maybe June 7th or so before they head home and start to work really on getting that re-election effort going in the primaries.
Where is the disagreement at this late hour, Jason, if you could put your finger on it?
There's a lot of bad blood between the legislature and the governor and how she's handling putting policy in the fiscal plan. And so they're haggling over details. Some of the things we know, they're looking at dialing back some of the climate change things. Some of it has to do with how local law enforcement will or will not interact with ICE. And then there are, of course, the fiscal issues. I don't think we're going to stay at 268. I think you're going to see a larger budget than that before it's done. There's always the public things we see in the papers or on the websites these days, and then you have the private things that you don't know about that are being decided by the governor and the legislative leaders.
Nothing's done till everything is done when it comes to New York State budget, for sure. Dan, House Democrats this week announcing plans to codify voting rights in the Commonwealth. They did not take kindly to that recent Supreme Court ruling in Louisiana striking down race-based gerrymandering. They see this as a real threat to the Voting Rights Act. Are those concerns warranted in your opinion?
Well, I think we have to point out, both parties gerrymander whenever they're in power. It happened just recently in our state, and it's one reason people get frustrated with politics in general. But I think something of note, and a point to our friends in New York, Chuck Schumer claiming that this ruling is a return to Jim Crow and suppressing black voters. I think that's absurd. You look, a state like Virginia, if just white Caucasian Virginians voted in this past election for governor, it would have been a black Republican woman as governor. So I think it's just really absurd when we look at statements like that. Jim Crow involved the systematic denial of basic human rights. And when we just look at this court decision and try to, compare that, it's trivializing the history of that political messaging that Chuck Schumer was portraying. So I think we need to push back on those kinds of comparisons.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. And every state has the right to draw its own political lines, and we're seeing a lot of that happening, this mid-decade redistricting phenomenon that's going on, Jason. New York is in the conversation as well. Any chance that it will reconfigure its congressional map to try and offset Republican gains in the Deep South this year?
Well, I think there is. They can't do anything this year because it will have to be a constitutional amendment passed by two successive legislatures. But there is the optics of what they're seeking to do. And so the conversation in the Capitol these days is of temporarily halting the Independent Redistricting Commission and then coming back to it after the next census. And so on one hand, the Democrats are saying, hey, we acknowledge that the people want independent redistricting. They voted for it in this referendum. But at the same time, it's not good for them, so they don't want to have it. It's an interesting conundrum that they're in right now is how to move forward and try to do what they can to show that they're fighting, even though they really can't do anything for this November's midterms.
Yeah, and I don't know how you right this ship. It just seems like the genie's out of the bottle on this one. But hey, primary day fast approaching in Pennsylvania. If you want to get your hands on the new voter guides, Dan, where can folks find one online?
PAFamilyVoter.org.
And stay informed on all the issues in New York as well. Jason McGuire, where can folks find you online?
NewYorkFamilies.org.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. The name of the program, Capital Connection, comes your way every Friday during the Noon Report or online anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and FamilyLife.org. And finally, at noon for a Friday, we're celebrating a small food invention that makes cookies worth consuming. Here's correspondent Bree Tennis.
Today is National Chocolate Chip Day, a tiny morsel that adds just the right amount of chocolatey goodness with minimal melt in the oven. And it's a relatively new invention. Ruth Wakefield of the Toll House Inn, yes, that Toll House, created them back in 1938 for her famous cookies. They're perfect and versatile, good in pancakes, cookies, cakes, trail mix, ice cream, muffins, or just by the handful. Yeah, they go with everything. I'm Bree Tennis.
They sure do. Thank you, Bree. And just like that, our time is up. That's our world, the world we live in. Friday, the 15th of May. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm Bob Price, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.